Welcome back. It's been about a little bit more than 4 months that this tank has been up, and I just want to do a full recap on the things that I learned along the way. Um, the initial thoughts on setting this tank up was to have it as a natural system with a Chaeto reactor pulling the nutrients out, and it worked well for a short while. You could tell the corals were exploding in growth. And honestly, if I could have had that Chaeto growing consistently, I would have found a method that I would have liked to stick with. But that wasn't the case. The Chaeto reactor was a big hassle and very tedious in maintenance, and it was just very inconsistent in its growth patterns to where it would grow very rapidly, and then the next time, it was almost at the time of harvesting that next cycle, every other cycle, it would just stop growing completely until the point where I began to grow algae in the display tank at a fairly, what I think now looking back, was a pretty rapid algae growth. And if I didn't intervene, I can definitely see that algae growth in the display tank would have overrun the tank. So it just did not work out in that sense, but it did have its benefits that I can say that it kept the tank seeming so natural that the corals were extremely happy up until the start of the algae growth in the display tank. With that being said, I started to have to take some different measures and go back to my old methods of Rowaphos and Nopox. So lately, in the last video, I added Rowaphos in here, and it did put a dent into the algae growth on the sand bed, and it stopped wanting to grow on the algae. I'm sorry, on the sand bed, but it began to grow on the rocks, and that's where I drew another line, and decided to go ahead and start the dosing of Nopox again, as I did in the previous two tanks, which were very nice tanks and ran pretty smoothly. And looking back at my videos, I did have sand growth on the sand bed, the algae growth on the sand bed on my rimless 28-gallon BioCube, or nanocube, I'm sorry, and pretty much went through the same thing. But this tank is going through something else right now to where the corals are not happy. And I check the parameters pretty much religiously: the alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrates, and phosphate. I check almost every day, at the most every other day, and everything has been spot on, but the corals have just not been happy. And I did, my bad habit of switching out a lot of equipment, which is maybe good for views. You can see me try out different products, but probably not as good for the hobby to keep changing things around on the fish tank. As far as the water parameters go, I've been keeping them stable, but the only thing I know I did change a lot was the lights, and since I put these ocean revived lights in here, the corals really haven't responded that well. You can see these zoanthids are not doing well. The GSP is not coming out in and out. I'm not sure what that orange coral is. I forgot the name of it, but it has been pissed since I put the lights in about a month ago, and this rock flower anemone that was always happy is not happy anymore. The torch corals do not want to extend to their full capacity as they did when I had the Kessel on here. This one's really not doing good, where it keeps retracting this head in, and I'm kind of getting worried about that. And then some corals are doing good, probably because I'm maintaining a good calcium alkalinity dosing going on, where I'm keeping those parameters pretty much higher and where they should be. So most of the stony corals are they are growing, and pretty well. But other than that, being a mixed reef tank, that's not good enough to me to have just one certain type of corals growing and others not. And actually, the others are seem to me to be struggling. So when I added the Rowaphos, it did put a dent in, as I said, to the hair algae growing on the sand bed, but it started to grow on the rocks, and that's where I drew another line and decided to go ahead and start dosing Nopox because I know that Nopox takes care of this issue. I dose 1 ml per day for this 25-gallon system. No more than that. And I have noticed changes since I started doing that about 4 days ago. It does rapidly increase, I guess, your bacteria, beneficial bacteria in the tank. So whatever was in there that I'm thinking possibly, I might have nitrate in there, if that's a possibility, just the same way as phosphate binds to algae and you can't read it as good, that maybe nitrate was actually binding to the algae also in the same type of way. But I would not read anything out of the normal of my test kits were not reading any higher than 5 parts per million of nitrate, if any at all. So I could not really tell right now. I'm kind of stumped on to why things are not going good and why this algae has been growing. And I've also did not talk about, but I have been doing for the past 4 months weekly water changes. Since that, I don't know if that contributes to it, but I never changed water that much. I don't see how that, I can't put it 2 and 2 together with me cleaning the water as much as I have been and having algae, hair algae growing in this system other than something leaching hardcore. This was dry rock that I purchased on Amazon that had very high reviews, and I'm not sure if it's leaching anything. I didn't really cure it, seeing as it's dry rock, and heard that you're not supposed to, but then other people say that you should still try to cure it or cook it or do something to it, which that might be the cause. There could be a lot of causes, but I just don't have a full-blown laboratory set up here, so I'm not really sure. But other than to just go ahead and just do my old regimen of Nopox, Rophos, and a giant skimmer, which has worked in those last 2 tanks extremely well in keeping algae from growing. And the only problem with that is that the Nopox will strip all the nutrients from the water, and if you don't have a way to supplement your corals by feeding or adding in the nutrients, they will dull in color and stunt and have stunted growth, which I experienced in the last tanks. So from here going out and forward, I will be focusing on using Nopox, the Rophos, and a giant skimmer, my HOB Aquamax, and focus on how to supplement the corals with the best nutrition they can have in an ultra low nutrient system using Nopox. And that is the new plan here. So not as a general recap or where I sit right now, I'm not too happy with the tank. It's I feel it's stressing out, so it's kind of stressing me out that a lot of these corals are not doing too good. But the only thing I can do now is kind of wait. I just changed the water yesterday and just keep on going forward, and I'm gonna try my hardest, my bad habit, try my hardest not to change anything going on in the tank, and just keep it absolutely stable for at least a month, and hopefully I can make it with my bad habit. But I will have some willpower on that, and it should do okay. So that's where we are now. I'm pretty confident I can make it work, as the last 2 tanks did very well, with the exception of, I kept coral alive and I kept them happy, but I did not keep them, they were not growing at a good rate. They seem to be stunted. So that is the obstacle here with Nopox. How to feed and keep these corals happy with just the right amount of nutrients. So I've looked into Aqua Vitro Fuel and Red Sea Reef Energy. Still gonna do some more research until I decide that will be the one thing. I'm gonna wait till things balance out a little bit more, another week or 2, until I start adding one of those, and just get on a regimen of supplementing the tank and keeping it stable from there on out. So that's about it. If you have any questions or comments or any pointers about Nopox and everything that I said and how if you've experienced this and gone through ultra low nutrient tank and what you've used to keep the corals happy, let me know. And hopefully when I find the answer to that, I will be posting it in the future videos and the progress of that. Alright, thanks for watching.